Hi, Gareth Hollis. Welcome back to Everything You Never Needed to Know About Me. This is episode 14, I believe, if I've done the maths right. And if you've watched the other episodes, you'll know that there is a distinct possibility that that is not the case. Maths is maybe not one of my stronger suits. So, trigger warning again, still haven't spoken about depression or about assault, so they'll be coming up at some point. I'm using a random number generator to say what I'm going to be talking about. To keep it interesting, and expect tangents, possibility of some bad language, and maybe a bit of repetition. And let's get straight into it with number 30. So number 30 is quite a high number when you've got it all in pages. It's a song. Losing My Insanity. Losing My Insanity is a song that it was the first song I wrote at a time I'd just been listening to one of the local bands in Horncastle called the Alma Boobies, who are three sisters playing all sorts of cover songs and a lot of their own songs. Sadly, no longer playing due to the drummer now having arthritis in her hand. Which is a shame. They're really good and worth checking out if you can have a look for them on YouTube. Anyway, so I was friends with them as well. They're in the pub. Their parents were landlords of the pub, which was only a few doors down from me. That was my local pub, so I was quite friendly with all of them anyway. So I spoke to one of the girls about this song I wrote called Losing My Insanity. And it's basically about the idea of like not conforming. Well, I suppose losing my insanity was the idea of conforming, of losing that thing that made you what you were, the thing that makes you different, the thing that makes you unique and individual. About losing my insanity, that little bit that makes me, I suppose, a little bit strange, a little bit me. So anyway, I took it. I thought, I can't play any instruments. I thought maybe if I took it there, they might be able to do something with it. They might be able to turn it into a song, and I'd love to hear it as a song. I had no aspirations further than that, and I took it to her, and she had to read through it and said, actually, yeah, this is really good. But I don't want to play this. I think you should play it. And so she started teaching me to play guitar. So I could play it myself. Now, unfortunately, this was at a time when I was working 3 jobs. I was working as a waiter and a barista for my dad. I was also working as a delivery driver for 2 different pizza places, almost like 2 rival pizza places. I was driving for both of them. And at the same time, I was also going out running every day, going to the gym, going cycling, getting fit for joining the army. So unfortunately, learning guitar, as much as I was enjoying doing it, was one of those things that just it had to take the hits out of everything. At the time, it was considered the least important, and unfortunately now it would have been really useful in that I could have played my own songs. But I can't see me now getting the time to start picking up an instrument. But never say never. If I've suddenly got the time and the money to buy the instrument, then I suppose there's no reason why I can't try and teach myself. No high aspirations, but just being able to do something would be nice. I did. It's not like I'm completely lacking in music ability. When I was younger, I did. I was a bit of a dab hand with the recorder, and I could play the start of 3 Blind Mice anyway, which is probably actually about as far as my musical prowess went as a youngster. Probably part of the reason I never pursued it any further, in all honesty. So Losing My Insanity, when I then wrote Christmas songs, I thought, actually, I'll put this on YouTube and maybe something will come of it. And as of yet, nothing has. But like I say never. Maybe at some point someone will turn it into an actual song. I like the message. I like the idea of sort of saying that you're not going to conform and that you're not going to lose that spark of madness. What's the point in being like everyone else? You know, you laugh at me because I'm different. I laugh at you because you're all the same. That's my mentality. I didn't make that up, by the way. I can't remember where I got that from. So I think I've exhausted that number. Next one. If anyone wants to make that song, by the way, feel free. The next number is 7. Number 7 is jobs. I've had quite a few jobs over the years. These aren't in any particular order. These are just as I thought of them and wrote them down. So I've now been in the army for, well, it'll be 13 years in a couple of weeks' time. Something I've enjoyed for the most part. I've enjoyed it enough that I've not left anyway. The pros definitely outweigh the cons, and I'd recommend the military to anyone. If you've got that little bit of something about you, you know that there's going to be hard work at times, and certainly basic training and things like that will test you. But once you get past that, there's so much more, especially if you're not like me and you enjoy things like adventure training, going mountaineering and kayaking or sailing or skiing and things like that, which I have no interest in. Then you'll love it. Lots of things for you. If you're good at sport, you can essentially do a lot of your career just what's called a tracksuit soldier, where although you've got a job, you're always away playing sports for the Corps or for the military and things like that. So you've got that. You can travel the world, meet interesting people, probably shoot at them. Not necessarily. I've never shot at anyone anyway. Well, not with live rounds. And it's well paid for what it is. It's not as good as it used to be. It's not the land of, well, like Germany used to be called the land of milk and honey before I got out there. Unfortunately, it's cutbacks in the military, especially since sort of the mid noughties and the recession, everything like that. It's not as good as it used to be in that respect, but it's still, I think if I went back to being a civilian again and working a different job, I definitely wouldn't be as well off. Which worries me because I really don't feel well off now, unfortunately. But that's life, I suppose. You adapt and you live to your means. If I suddenly had an extra £1,000 a year to spend, I'm sure I'd spend it and probably not even realise what I'd spent it on. That is life. It's a shame they can't just give you a pay rise and put it straight into a different account. So next one I've got down is barista, chef and waiter. So when I moved to Horncastle, I was working for my dad. He opened up a patisserie. So early on, when I was about 15, I was working primarily as a waiter. So after school and Saturdays and Sundays, that's where I'd be working. And then when I left school, halfway through my GCSEs, I was then working there full time, 6 or 7 days a week. It wasn't particularly well paid, but yeah, got to meet some interesting people, kept me out of trouble. And as a 17-year-old by that point, then it was putting money in my pocket, and I'd never really had money before. Like I say, we weren't, although my dad was earning fairly well, we weren't an affluent family just because of other decisions like having lots of children and having a big mortgage. So it was nice to then have the money and be able to spend it. Went from being a waiter to working in the kitchen as well, working as a chef, as the under chef most of the time, and then as head chef sometimes. Again, interesting. It's fun times. I'd never really done a lot of cooking before, so it was good to start learning how to make things. I've forgotten a lot of it now, unfortunately, which is a shame because I used to like some of the things I made. But I've mentioned it a couple of times. I haven't really got onto the whole memory issues yet, but that'll come up when I talk about depression. But there's a lot of things I don't remember now, unfortunately. And I went from there to working at the front again as a barista, which is the person who makes all the fancy teas and coffees, the cappuccinos and the lattes and the hot chocolates and the specialty teas and all that lot. So going on to doing that, and also working as waiter at the time, I was also the trainee manager, so I had run of the whole front of it for the most part, and bits of the kitchen, depending on who was in. Like the head chef would still overrule me for the kitchen, but certainly on the shop floor, I was putting the orders in for new stock, and like organising when people took breaks, and when people should be starting clearing up, and getting the next load of food out, and bread and pastries and all that sort of stuff, which was good for someone my age at the time. I'd have been probably 22, 23 at the time. No, must have been 22. And it felt like a lot of responsibility, and it was one of the times where I've actually felt good at something. Like in the military, I've never really felt good at my job. So people, they want you to lead, they want you to show these leadership qualities, and that's all well and good if you, I can lead you if I know where I'm going. And in that job, I knew I'd been doing bits and pieces there long enough that I knew the job, and I knew I could lead. But in this job, there's so many different people pulling in different directions that who knows which direction you're actually meant to be in or meant to be heading in. So I'm not a leader. Don't follow me. I'm lost. Is kind of my viewpoint on it. Pizza delivery, that's something I did quite a lot, and it was weird because as a, I don't want to say boy racer, but certainly someone who enjoyed playing with cars, modifying cars, driving around. That was one of those things that people thought it was odd that I was then working in this pizza place. They all sat in, there was 2 pizza places pretty much on the marketplace. Certainly when I was waiting to take the orders, my car would be in the marketplace. That was the closest place to park. And that's where like all the boy racers and girl racers used to sort of meet up, and they'd sit there for a while, like smoking and stuff, and then they'd go for a bit of a drive round, and then they'd come back and do some more sitting there and talking and smoking, and then do the same again. And they used to think, sort of look down on me for working. And like, I'm also sitting around, driving around, coming back, doing the same thing. But I'm getting paid for it, and I just understand how they thought I was the odd one in that one. But pizza delivery I thought was great. So I'd be, for the most part, I wasn't working in the shop. I wasn't answering the phone that much, depending on how many other people were in. So I'd just be sat in the back reading a book, which I love reading. So sitting there reading a book was great. And then I'd take the order, I'd get in my car, and I'd drive in my car, which was great because I love driving, especially like when I had my Beetle. That was great fun to drive around in. And then I'd come back and I'd do some more reading, and at the end of it, they'd give me money, and they'd give me a pizza. And despite the fact I used to get free pizza most nights of the week, never got bored of pizza. In fact, I had pizza last night. Pizza's great. So McDonald's. So when I was about 18, living in Leicester, I was living with my grandparents at the time, and living next door to my cousin. And she persuaded me in the end to work at McDonald's where she was working. So I went through all the application. It took a while to get in, and literally just as I started working there, she stopped working there. I can't remember if we even did a shift at the same time or not. I didn't last that long. I went through the grill side and the chicken side, but I probably only did it for maybe 3 or 4 months, and then I went back to Horncastle one day for, I think it was like for Christmas, and I was in the pub on Christmas Eve, and I met someone who I then decided actually I wanted to spend a lot more time with, and I moved back to Horncastle. I was with her for about 1.5 years. And then when we split up, I visited a friend in Hull, and he said, you just split up with your girlfriend, you just left your job. Can't remember the exact why about that one. And then why don't you stay here for a bit? So I think he only meant short term, but I ended up being there for well over a year, and most of that spent like sleeping on his sofa in the front room. But we had a laugh. And he was a student at the time, so I went to a lot of like student parties and student nights, and like drinking at £1 a pint. That was amazing. You just go out with 20 quid and come back no money and think, there is no way I've drank 20 pints. That's not me. But I don't know where it went. But still, being able to have a really good night out on 20 quid is not something to be sniffed at. Anyway, so living in Hull, I obviously had to get a job, bring some money in. So I went into the job centre, and someone approached me and said, asking if I wanted a job. I think literally just looking at my age and my physique. I mean, not like athletic, but I'm not like a fat blob or anything. And the job was selling karate, which I know it sounds odd. So I was going door to door selling karate lessons. As part of that, we got given karate lessons. I think it was 3 times a week. As part of the job, so it's like we actually knew what we were talking about, and I really enjoyed that job. I liked the people I worked with. I enjoyed like doing the karate lessons, but unfortunately it was commission based, and I just wasn't earning enough money at it. So that was probably one of the most fun jobs I've had. Unfortunately, I had to give it up. I went from that on to doing onto selling double glazing of all things. So that was. In fact, I'm not going to mention the company, but that was I did some canvassing again, asking people if they were looking to change the windows or doors, and I did some the person who goes to the door and tries to sell double glazing, and it was all right. It was commission based, and I was kind of a bit misinformed when I started the job in that there was a basic salary and then you had your commission on top. And the basic salary was 150 quid a week, and I thought, well, worst case scenario, if I don't make any money, 150 quid a week, I could survive on that. But that basic rate dropped over the course of the first couple of months, at which point you're meant to be proficient. And when I left that, I thought it was I'd had some car trouble and stuff. It got to the point where I thought, I can't keep doing this, and I'm obviously not making enough money at it. It was only when I did my self-assessment tax return, because it was classed as self-employed. I did that at the end of the year and thought, oh, actually, I was doing a lot better at this than I thought I was. I'd made about £5,000 in the last couple of months, and thought, maybe I should have kept up with that. But yeah, that ship had sailed by that point. I feel like as I said, I'd always not had confidence right from being at school, so that maybe now, if I did it, I'd be a little bit better at it. But I feel like I don't make a great first impression, which is part of the reason I'm doing these videos. Also, I'm not great at small talk. So there's a lot kind of already working against me. You've got, I suppose I had to overcome those barriers before I could even think about selling, because they're buying the person, really. They're not going to buy from someone they don't like. So I suppose I had those hurdles to overcome before I could even start like selling myself. Anyway, that were egg collector. I actually worked briefly, and it was very briefly, for a company that had loads and loads of chickens, and my job was to go around to go into the big room where all these chickens were, hundreds and hundreds of chickens, and collect all the eggs. It's not a bad job, but I didn't last long at it, because they like all the dust from these chickens like running around, scratching around when they in the straw, it aggravated my lungs. I'll end up losing my voice completely for a while, and that's why I ended up leaving that job. It took me a while to then get another job, and this is where the debt problem came in, because then when I spoke to the bank and said like I'd had to give up the job to medical reasons, and I was looking at getting another job, and I'd got a loan with them at the time which had PPE, the payment protection, and they said no, not covered for that. So I thought, well, fuck you then, ended up getting in a lot more debt because I couldn't afford to pay back that, and I was getting like late charges piled on and stuff. I thought, well, if you're not going to like help me and do the things you're meant to be doing with this, that I was understood was part of it, that I'd signed up for, that I was paying extra for, then you'll have to wait for your money, because I'm not in a position to do anything about it. Dessert factory. This was when I lived in Torquay. I was working at a dessert factory in Newton Abbot. I'd only just got the job. I'd been working there about a week when my girlfriend's mum then sadly passed away, and we then had nowhere to live and had to leave Torquay. I'd been there maybe, I want to say about 6 or 7 weeks, I don't remember exactly now, and I had been working as a pizza delivery driver there for a bit of it, and then I'd also just got this job, so I'd just started to bring a bit of money in, and then it all went wrong, unfortunately. So I only did that one for I think about a week, making cakes for supermarkets. Dyson. So I used to make Dysons back in the early days of Dyson, around about 99, 2000-ish. I had a bit of a falling out with my stepmom about working at the patisserie, and she said, okay, well, yeah, fine, leave, go get a job in the real world and see how you like it there then. It turned out I quite liked it a lot. I was earning a lot more money for doing a lot less hours, so I was working on the assembly lines, making different bits in this plastics factory for Dysons. It wasn't a Dyson factory, but their primary customer at the time was Dyson. So taking all the different bits off the production line and assembling the cyclone units and getting those all boxed up. And I was working 3 days a week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Alternate weeks would be days or night shifts, and I was earning more for doing that than I was earning for a full week where I was working at the patisserie, and I was probably doing at least a third less hours. I also worked at a pork factory, and this was in Boston, or near Boston, and I remember I was on this was like mobile phones at the time were fairly new to like being common on the market, and the signal still wasn't great, and I was outside on the phone during my break, and talking to my girlfriend, and I couldn't go inside because I couldn't get a signal anywhere and really needed a wee, so I went for a wee in the bushes outside, and then when I went back in I ended up getting sacked because it was deemed less hygienic to be weeing outside away from all the food than to be doing it inside. So again, that was another short-lived one. I worked as a recycling operative. So when I left Torquay and I went up to Leicester, to start with, I was working on a conveyor belt where so this was in the early days of sort of getting a recycling bin. So people were starting to separate the rubbish, and I was working on this plant where all the recycling bins were being emptied onto this conveyor belt, and I had to separate out the paper or the cans, depending on which part of the belt I was on. So the plastics, etc., and put them into the bin. So I'd be in charge of, say, the paper bin, and as it came down the belt, I'd be pulling off all the bits of paper and putting them in there. It sounds a horrible job, but I actually quite enjoyed it, and the people I worked with were fun as well, because they're people who they just didn't give a shit about a lot of things. So they were kind of my type of people. They didn't take themselves too seriously, and we had a good laugh. And it was, so I was working 40 hours a week, but it was in 4 10-hour shifts. And then they decided that they were going to make it into 5 8-hour shifts. So the same amount of time, but spread out over 5 days. And I wasn't up for that. I enjoyed my 3-day weekend. I enjoyed only having to drive in and out of work those 4 days. So I left, and that's when I ended up working at McDonald's. And in the early days of being in Leicester, the first thing I was doing was working as a canvasser. So like when I was going knocking door to door selling karate, or door to door trying to sell double glazing, I was one of those annoying people who knocks on your door and say, are you interested in switching your gas or electricity? Again, that was another commission-based thing, and something that I wasn't particularly great at. So I ended up leaving that one. So a bit of a, I really probably should have written them down in some kind of order, but where's the fun in that, I suppose? So that's going to be the end of that one. We're at about 25 minutes now, so I'm going to say thank you for watching. Hope it's not been completely boring. Please like and subscribe. Please tune in for the next video, and I'll see you there. Catch you on the other side.